Hello, I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this word in your ear, the latest of hundreds of chats Mark Allen and I have had over recent years, some between ourselves and others with musicians, authors, comedians, and other people we like. If you'd like to help make sure they continue, you might consider being a Patreon supporter by visiting patreon.com/wordinyourear, or just by liking or subscribing in whatever way you prefer. On with the show.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, welcome to The Word podcast, which we're once again doing actually in person in a room at the top of my house. This rarely happens, doesn't it?
It does. It's very nice to be here. Back in David Hepworth's attic, where the very first Word podcast was recorded, Dave.
Back in 2006.
Something like 16 years ago.
Absolutely. I think it's 2006.
It was.
So anyway, on this occasion, to celebrate our reunion here at the end of the summer, I've got a Stack Waddy game. Are you ready for this, Mark?
Go on, fire away.
And this Stack Waddy game involves those occasions when pop groups, pop stars have collaborated with children's musical turns. Okay? And I'm going to give you 4, and one of them is I've made up. Okay?
Yep.
But the other 3 are real. So, Kylie Minogue with the Wiggles. Kylie Minogue with the Wiggles.
Okay.
Joan Baez with the Muppets. Joan Baez with the Muppets. Freddie and the Dreamers with Pinky and Perky. Freddie and the Dreamers with Pinky and Perky. And Canned Heat with the Chipmunks. Canned Heat with the Chipmunks. You got to tell me which
one of those
is made up. Is made up.
I'm absolutely certain. Don't give me the answer yet. That Kylie Minogue must have collaborated with the Wiggles, because I think the Wiggles are Australian. I may be completely wrong.
They are indeed, and they collaborated on doing. They did Monkey Man by the Maytals.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's excellent. Joan Baez and the Muppets, I'm sure, in my head I can see it actually, and I'm sure that happened. I think Canned Heat and the Chipmunks, because it's so ridiculous, and because Canned Heat, Bob the Bear Height, the Fito de la Para, etc., you can imagine them being the kind of people who would have thought that would have been amusing. So that I'm saying that Freddie and the Dreamers never had any kind of collaboration with Pinky and Perky, though I wish it had happened. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely correct.
Oh, okay.
Kylie Minogue did Monkey Man by the Maytals with the Wiggles. Canned Heat did Christmas Boogie with the Chipmunks.
Excellent.
In 1968.
Oh.
Joan Baez did The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down with the Muppets, of course. But Freddie and the Dreamers, sadly, never got together in the studio and jammed with Pinky and Perky. and jammed
super session.
At Pinky and Perky on Twist and Shout. That was merely a figment of my fevered imagination.
That's superb.
Sad to say. So anyway,
good work.
You've done well there. So last week when I was away on holiday, I woke up and then turned on my phone and I think the New York Times news alert was that Greg Kihn had died. And Greg Kihn, not a wildly well-known figure to many people over here, although he had a number 2 record in the United States.
Jeopardy?
Jeopardy.
Yeah, I remember it, yeah.
In the early 80s, which I think was kept from the number 1 spot by Michael Jackson's Billie Jean.
So that's big. That was selling a lot.
That was selling a lot.
Yeah.
But the reason that this meant a lot to me was I knew Greg pretty well. Because he used to be an act on Berserkly Records, and I worked for Berserkly Records, the UK arm, in the late 70s. And so that was a very formative part of my life. And I couldn't help thinking of the fact that in 1978, I think it was 1978, I went to the United States for the first time, and I went to Memphis, Tennessee, which you talked about in the past. But afterwards, I went straight to San Francisco and spent, I don't know, about 5 days living with Greg at Greg's house, you know, in Berkeley, the Bay Area, and so forth. And I've never forgotten that experience because, he picked me up at the airport.
And you posted a lovely picture of it. Was that the day that you went onto the softball game and all that?
Well, yeah, that picture was taken probably the same day.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a glorious picture, actually, where the two of us just look
so lit up.
Young.
Glad to be alive. So thrilled with each other's company. It's
Absolutely.
Great.
But I suddenly got this favoured glimpse into the life of a kind of, somebody he was a bit of a name locally in the Bay Area, you know what I mean? Like America. I don't think it happens any longer. For a long period of time, you'd go to various cities in America where people would be local stars.
Big stars, yeah.
You know what I mean?
And they stepped outside the city limits and no one had ever heard of them.
Probably, we don't have that in the UK. It doesn't exist in the same way, But he was big in the Bay Area, and so there would always be, every week there would be a regular big club gig at the Keystone in Berkeley or somewhere like that, and there would be hundreds of people in there, And cost of living was nothing like it is now, So I'm not saying anybody got rich out of it at all, but they could kind of get by, It was a decent life. And then never forget being picked up, sunny day at the airport, and driven straight to a softball field.
Oh, wonderful.
Where they met every week, the member of Greg Kihn's band and members of Earthquake and the Rubinews. They would all be there.
Berserkly, but that's right, yeah.
They would all be there, and they would all just get together and smoke grass and play softball and so forth. And then you would go home and you'd have pizza in the garden and so forth. And they'd have quite pleasant homes that they lived in. Nothing grand, but it was quite enough to turn the head of a young man like me,
Well, it's the combination also of the fact that it was pretty much your first time being in America, wasn't it?
This is it.
So the whole thing was just new. You've only ever seen it in the movies, and now here it is.
This is it, and I've never forgotten that, and the following morning going to, let's go out for breakfast. Going out for breakfast
never
in
done.
the UK in 1978 just simply didn't exist.
And if it did, it'd be a greasy spoon, it'd be a wimpy bar.
Absolutely, Whereas there you went to proper mugs of coffee, which would be replenished free of charge,
refills.
You know what I mean?
Big chunky china cups.
And you would make the mistake of ordering the kind of large American breakfast, which of course nobody ever finishes.
No.
You know what I mean? You do it once and you never do it again. Do you? And then you go along to the record shop, the local record shop in Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley. Berkeley, of course, huge university town, huge hippie centre, full of young people. And you go to the record shop, which was called Rather Ripped Records.
Fabulous.
And just go through the deletions or whatever in that place. And then in the afternoon, they would go and rehearse. They lived like the Monkees, they lived like the Beatles in Hard Day's Night.
They'd open up all their fan mail in their communal flat.
They would go, all their equipment was kept in a lock-up garage. And I remember this, they'd drive around there and they'd just open the roller shutter and there would be
all the
setup.
amps all set
There
up.
were the amps,
That's
there was
a
drum
dream,
kit,
isn't it?
and they'd just go straight in there and they'd just pick up their instruments and go and...
a garden suburbs version of what was happening in central New York a few years later, wasn't it? Except you had your own space.
Absolutely. And it's never left me as an idea of a kind of, oh my God, that was a life of ease. You know what I mean? And I think there was that moment in the late 70s when bands did this all over the place because accommodation was quite cheap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You talk to New York musicians around about the same time and they would say, you could get a loft in Soho, places that nowadays are full of, hedge fund people and so forth.
Garage rock, or garage rock, as I would call it, because they come from Hampshire. But that's where it all came from, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, that was Greg, and he never had any great success on Berserkly, but afterwards, in the kind of early 80s, in the great video scare kind of post MTV, he had this huge hit, Jeopardy, and he had some other hits as well. So he's one of those people.
And he was Berserkly's biggest artist, wasn't he, I think? Wasn't he the biggest selling artist?
I don't know. I don't know how they add that up.
I think they always said he was. And he had those wonderful records with punning titles, which were kind of...
I've got copies here.
Have you?
Greg Kihn.
Conspiracy.
Yes, those were the later ones. They got a bit different.
Citizen Keen.
Yeah. So we've got Greg Kihn again, next to Kihn there. I just dug this out this morning, and it's autographed by, Greg and all the rest of the band. Some of whom I think are also no longer with us.
Yeah.
It's a great kind of feeling of the chill hand of mortality on your shoulder. And so Greg, he had those hits, and I met him years later. I met him when he got in touch with me when he had a later career as a DJ. He was on a radio station.
He had a really fabulous voice.
In San Jose, a terrific voice.
Yeah.
And
for 15 years.
15 years. And I think he was very well paid.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And he called me, or he got in touch with me once, and I think I was at Word, May not have been. He said, I'm at Abbey Road next week, and will you come down? I said, yeah, sure. And I went down to Abbey Road, and there the whole of Studio One, the large studio at Abbey Road, was laid out with like school desks, as though they were about to have exams, And at each one of these school desks was a microphone and a DJ from a different American radio station. They brought over about 40 of them or something like
Incredible.
This. Yeah, I think the station belonged to one of those American networks, of radio stations. And they brought them all over, so the idea was a bit of a gimmick. It might have been Sweeps Week or whatever. We're going to broadcast from the legendary Abbey Road. And so they needed guests to come in and help pass the time. And so I went in and was guest on Greg's show. And afterwards we went to the pub, and he told me about his kind of adventures of fame and wealth, I think he did a lot of stupid things over a very short period of time.
So the wealth disappeared, probably.
Well, I think it tended to happen. Anyway, he found another career. He wrote, very successfully, kind of rock-based detective fiction. And then got this job as a DJ, which, as I say, lasted for about 15 years.
Really
and then one day just stopped, as suddenly as it began. But he all the while he kept the band going, and they were on the oldies circuit, and he always used to say, name any band, any American band, he had supported them. And I think it's pretty much true.
Did he ever write a memoir? I don't think he did.
He never wrote a memoir.
What a shame. That would have been really good. He's a very funny guy.
Yeah, very funny.
Very witty and really observant. That would have been good.
And so, died, a week ago of complications arising from Alzheimer's at the age of 75. It's very sad.
Pause.
It gives you pause, and it really strikes home. So, what else were we going to talk about? You talk about Stewart Lee and Ricky.
Well,
I was a bit slow with this one. I didn't realise they had a feud.
You sent me this clip of Stewart Lee talking about Ricky Gervais, and it is pretty funny, actually. And they did have a feud. I mean, Ricky Gervais, Stewart Lee's view of this is that Ricky Gervais had great work. He made The Office, which he loved. He said, and since then he said diminishing returns to the point where his work is now abysmal. I mean, he doesn't hold back.
By God, he doesn't hold back.
It's really kind of vicious. And, I mean, I've been following this story for some time because actually Stewart Lee posted a while ago that he thought that Ricky Gervais had effectively stolen his act. God. And this is complicated because obviously, as he's said in various comic riffs, copywriting gags or copywriting the delivery of gags, the way you tell jokes, your whole mannerism, is not something that's very easy to legally protect. I mean, obviously, it's not like songwriters. You can say, you have literally nicked my chord sequence, and I want to see you in court and demand this amount of money. So he's always done, and I have to say that Stewart Lee's got a reputation for this, and he's very funny. He does this brilliant riff about Joe Pasquale, about how Joe Pasquale had stolen this joke a while ago from a guy called Michael Redmond, who was a comic, probably maybe 25, 30 years ago. Michael Redmond was a kind of fringe character. He used to start his act. It's an absolutely brilliant joke. He used to come on as a really odd-looking bloke with a kind of droopy moustache and slightly shaggy hair and a kind of trampish coat. And he would always be carrying big carrier bags. It just looked really strange. And he would stand in front of the audience, absolutely silent, for about 2 minutes, while people just laughed and just thought, what's going to happen? And then his opening line would always be, a lot of people say to me, "Get out of my garden." Which is really funny. You're immediately gripped, aren't you? You want to know where this is going to lead. Anyway, that was his gag. And Joe Pasquale famously went on a royal variety show and did that exact same gag. Mm-hmm. And Stewart Lee just thought this is, which he said also was ridiculous, because it's structurally compromised by the fact that it's only funny if you don't know who the person is. But if Joe Pasquale appeared in your garden, people would go, Is that Joe Pasquale? My God,
yeah.
What's he doing in my garden? So it doesn't really work as a joke. But anyway, he's always done this big thing about it. And he's very, very outspoken about Ricky Gervais. And I thought it was interesting, really, because Ricky Gervais is one of those people who started off with this massive critical acclaim, and then went on to do Extras, which is also very, very good, actually. And then he got, Robert De Niro and David Bowie and all these people pitching in. And since then, it's kind of tailed off. And his whole thing is, I don't care. I have no fear. I'm Ricky Gervais. I fear no one. And Stewart Lee feels this is untrue. That Stewart Lee, in his defence, thinks that he is genuinely fearless. And I'm sure he is. I mean, nobody likes to be unpopular, but he knows what his audience is, and he knows how he can reinforce that relationship with them, And Ricky Gervais, claiming to fear nobody, is, he thinks, sitting at home hating the idea that his popularity is slightly diminishing, and also that the kind of critics who loved him back in the day are not writing nice things about him. You don't tend to find that anymore. So it's a very bitter setup, and it's very interesting.
Do you think the jealousy between comics, or the kind of competition between comics, is more intense than the competition between musicians?
Yeah, I do, and I'm Stewart Lee's very, very straight about that. He said in the past that I am envious of the fact that Ricky Gervais can command £10 million for a comedy special. I'd love to do that, but I'm Stewart Lee, and would, if I got that kind of thing, it would stop me improving. He's all about integrity, and I kind of admire that, and I think it's probably true, actually. But yeah, I think there's immense amounts of jealousy, envy, rivalry, isn't there?
I don't
imagine standing in the wings watching the person who's supporting you. And there must be part of you who's just wanting them just to die.
Oh God, yes.
Which is not true of rock and roll bands, because they can play a completely different kind of music to the music you're going to play. It can be going down well, and they're doing the job of warming up your audience.
Yes, I suppose.
But
I used to do this storytelling evening called True Stories Told Live.
I remember it. Brilliant.
Well, we ran it for a few years, and I think we had 5 different storytellers, and these might be people. They might be novelists, they might be journalists, they might be school teachers, they might be firemen, there might be people from all walks of life. There might be people who've done a lot of speaking in front of people who've done hardly anything, and occasionally you would get a comedian. And the thing I found about this was that comedians were fundamentally different people. Mm. They are not sharers at all.
No.
You know what I mean?
They jealously guard their material.
They jealously guard everything. They would go off in a corner beforehand. It would be impossible to have any kind of discussion with them about. I'm not expecting them to tell me everything they're going to do, but just to get some feeling.
Yeah.
You would never get that from them at all. They would go off in a corner and get themselves into the space that they needed to be in to do their thing, and then they would go up and do their thing, and then they would kind of pretty much leave. You know what I mean? They were kind of antisocial, by
They're
nature.
very insular. Very insular.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's interesting that the world they're working in doesn't have that kind of greatest hits element that music does. So I remember seeing an interview with Eddie Izzard who explained it really well. Eddie Izzard said, what you do is, this was a few years ago, is you write a load of new material, brand new material, stuff you've never done before. Then you go out and you tour it. And then the last few dates of that tour, you record a DVD and you put the DVD on sale, and then that's it. That's sealed and it's tied up, and then you forget that and you move on, and then you write a whole load of new material. Yeah. So the degree to which you're anxious about protecting that material is immense, and that's why they go through agony now. That you can be on tour doing a load of gags and people can be just tweeting those gags or whatever, and that's just using up. But it's not like you can't tweet a little bit of a song and it ruin the song. It can actually only increase your appetite for wanting to hear the song. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because we used to do that thing on this podcast years ago. We talked about the hoary old rock anecdote that they were like greatest hits, and you could retell them. We did the 100th podcast. We actually went to Abbey Road. Do you remember that?
Right. Yeah.
And 4 or 5 of us, and we did retell old jokes. We did Van Morrison and the harmonica. I probably did Chrissy Hind and the pâté de foie gras. I can't remember, but we just did old gags. Yeah. We did them as kind of do some old, as if it was a greatest hits. You know. And comedians don't have that. They just don't. If Stewart Lee couldn't, Stewart Lee is a bad example because he doesn't do that kind of comedy, but nobody could go out and say, I'm going to just retell the best gags I ever told.
They can't do it.
You just can't do. Tim Vine, is he going to do an entire thing of all the best one-liners he did at the end? Well, we kind of know them. We know them already. So I think it's a completely different world.
It's a very different world. And if you haven't already seen it, anybody listening to this, I do recommend the documentary films, because I think there are 2. The Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling.
I've not seen that.
Which is just fantastic. Yeah. Who's called No Longer With Us. And what's his face? The really good comedy filmmaker whose name I can't think of. He was his kind of mate.
Rob Reiner?
No. Anyway, doesn't matter. I won't try to think.
Yeah.
And he made this brilliant 2-part documentary about his life based on the pages and pages of diary that Shandling wrote. So Shandling never had a thought that he didn't write down. So there's just pages and pages of yellow note legal paper scribbled on with ideas. Yeah. It was just every day he woke up trying to think of it, turning anything into a gag, and how do you shape the line so you make it funny, somehow. It was an extraordinary obsession he had. He thought, that must be really difficult to live with.
Really, really hard.
To live with every morning.
Also you're looking at, imagine being married to the, exactly. I mean, because you're looking at everything thinking that's possibly raw material.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that Ricky Gervais was being held to account for by Stewart Lee, was the fact that Stewart Lee analyses humour, analyses the way it works. Ricky Gervais was doing the same thing, and also that kind of conversational tone that he has. It's not theatre; it's just as if you're talking,
Yeah.
But I think, and Stewart Lee's stuff about why jokes work is brilliant, and how they always have a trip. I think he calls it a topper. You do the gag and then you put in a topper over the top just to keep the laugh going,
Yeah.
And the old Jimmy Tarbuck comedians had toppers were just kind of, it's true. They just go, have it your own way, or
Yes, I suppose catchphrases. Yeah, but catchphrases are gone, have they? Really?
Probably.
If you're in the Jimmy Tarbuck, Bruce Forsyth, or whatever, it was a catchphrase that kept you going for 40 years.
Yeah, it was
something like that. People came along expected to hear that.
Well, the catchphrase would be on your poster, wouldn't it?
Yes,
it'd be in your name. Actually.
Yes, it would. It'd be on your billing.
Yeah.
So I couldn't believe the kind of how savage Stewart Lee's criticism of Ricky Gervais was.
But Stewart Lee's just made a reputation. I mean, he writes a column for The Observer, which is much the same, and he's just decided there are certain people he really dislikes and really hammers into them. He has a thing on his website called In the Pedal Bin, where he just has people that he just despises, and some of them are very obvious targets, like Donald Trump or whatever, but he just, I think he's, that's the way he identifies his personality a lot of the time, by flagging up all the things he despises.
Yeah. So I'm just catching up with the news when I returned from my holiday, and I wondered if you might be it might be your name might have been added to the lengthening list of people who used to work for the BBC who are now cancelled.
God, no. It is absolutely correct. I was looking at this only this morning.
Jermaine Jeddis.
Yeah, we were talking about Jermaine Jeddis, who's been
wait,
let go, hasn't he, for inappropriate behaviour in the workplace.
Isn't that... Sorry, I don't want to get into the detail of him, because I don't know the detail of him, and, and it's none of my business. But... isn't, let go and all the kind of phraseology around it, has failed to live up to the highest standards of, isn't it all just appallingly mealy-mouthed? Do you know what I mean? It's the kind of thing that you can imagine the Victorians coming up with if had broadcasting been around in those days, or the Puritans or whatever. He's let down everybody. He's let down his mother and father, and he's let down himself. All this kind of stuff, and I can't believe. Apart from, obviously there's the odd appalling case like Jimmy Savile. But I can't believe how in the majority of these cases they couldn't have been headed off at the pass.
Could have been managed internally.
Absolutely. I think to myself, all these managers, and by God, the BBC's got a lot of managers.
It has.
All these managers who are now turning around going, yes, go and never darken my door again. You've let me down.
Never darken our towels again.
They've taken down your picture from the kind of,
They've changed the name of the block. That
the Frankie Howard room or whatever.
Right.
They've got rid of it. You think to yourself, hold on a cotton picking minute. What were you buggers doing when this was all going on? You know what I mean? Is there nobody? I don't even know what he's supposed to have done. Genuinely don't know.
He sent inappropriate texts, but you think somebody could have said to him, I'm not saying that's a good thing, it's obviously a bad thing to have done, but somebody could have taken him aside and said, mate, somebody's complained about you, and if this is the case,
do it once more, you're gone.
Stop doing it, or you are out in your ear.
You're out.
You're out in your ear, and we come out of this looking wonderful.
We gather in the courtyard and we burn your books, kind of thing. That's what, you know what I mean? And we all feel terribly smug. And here's the other interesting point. He's another person who now has to be kind of edited out of whatever.
Well, that's the thing I was thinking. I was looking this morning at various people in the past. It's a long. Shall I read out this list? People I've written down. These are people who've just had run-ins with the BBC for, in many cases, very, very inappropriate behaviour. Jonathan King, Chris Denning, Stuart Hall. Richard Bacon. Do you remember Richard Bacon was presenting? Was it Blue Peter? There was a cocaine scandal.
Well, there was one. But I think he came back. Actually, I think he came back. He came back.
But he had to sit on the naughty stair for a while. Certainly,
if he can find room on the naughty stair,
because on that naughty stair you'd also find Budge Up, Jonathan Ross, Russell Brand, Jeremy Clarkson. Jeremy Clarkson. You forget Jeremy Clarkson had his ups and downs. I don't know whether Dr. Fox actually worked for the BBC, but Dr. Fox certainly got himself into all manner of gruesome hot water, didn't he? Tim Westwood, Martin Bashir.
Tim Westwood.
I'd forgotten about Tim Westwood. I know. Martin Bashir, because of the Lady Di.
And Martin Bashir, if ever there was a case, whenever you revisit the Martin Bashir case, which is hair-raising. Really.
It's terrible.
Because that's just appalling. Ethics.
Really bad.
Really appalling. You think, where were the bloody managers?
Yeah.
Who were the managers? All these managers who rehired him, you know what I mean? Promoted him or whatever. But what about those guys? They're supposed to be in charge of this kind of thing.
Are you telling me they had no idea?
I really don't know. But, the numbers of them, because...
Hugh Edwards, of course, is the most recent one. But there we are.
Because Hugh Edwards, the most recent case, that means, presumably... And this is very serious for an organisation like the BBC, which relies on its heritage, which relies on the fact that we were there when everything happened, in the past, so we can always go wander down our back pages, all our yesterdays or whatever are part of what we do. Presumably, Hugh Edwards means that they can no longer broadcast the announcement of the death of the late Queen, because he did it. And so, you know what I mean? And
That's probably true.
I think it's true. And listen,
Was he the first person to announce
think
that
he
she
probably
died?
was.
I think he might have been. Because I can remember the day, because you and I were phoning each other throughout the day saying, do you think what I think?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
And at that point, Hugh Edwards reappeared on television, Dave,
With
wearing
a black tie.
suit,
Yeah.
a black tie and a white shirt. And at that point, I think you and I rang each other up and said, she's died, obviously.
Yeah.
I think it was him,
But
actually.
all this stuff, they used to be able to just delve into the archive and say, whistle me up anything, old football coverage, old Top of the Pops, old It's a Knockout,
But
old
now, by the
Doctor-
time
they
you've
can't.
excised Jimmy Savile, you're barely going to see Shawaddy Waddy, are you? There's going to be nothing left.
Seriously,
No.
there must be some poor sod at the BBC must have to go into the archives all the time. Every Monday morning they turn up, they take out the world's largest pair of scissors, and they get handed a list and say, "Can you just go down to the archive and remove the
all
following
these people."
actors, DJs,
Yeah.
newsreaders, whatever?" And you think to yourself, serious point, you think, can we just get over this? You know what I mean? Can we? Is anybody really harmed if this stuff appears? You know what I mean?
But the problem is that if you saw Jimmy Savile introduce something,
Jimmy Savile
you wouldn't get past the
is
fact
a
it was Jimmy
very
Savile. You're not then going to think about the editorial.
That's
are
a
you?
very extreme
Yeah,
example.
he is an extreme example. true. Yeah.
That's like looking at every person who ended up in the dock alongside Dr. Crippen, isn't it? Really?
No, it is.
It's not
very
it's not
extreme.
appropriate balance. But you thought to yourself, eventually the BBC will wake up one Monday morning, and the guy with the scissors will say, "Who do you want me to take out now?" And they'll say, "Nobody. We've taken them all out.
Take them all out now.
They've all gone.
Yeah.
The whole past has gone. Because the whole past, in one way or another, contained too many individuals who were guilty of transgressions of one kind or another."
Yeah.
So that's the way it's going to be forever.
Which we, of course, and that's the other thing about the BBC is that when the BBC, do dismiss anybody, they are then seen to fall over backwards to advertise the fact they've done it. In fact, television news on the BBC will often lead with the story, so they can't possibly be accused by the Daily Mail of in any way trying to bury it. Not only have we outed this person as being some kind of dreadfully badly behaved person, but we've been not shy about telling people about it.
Tell me, has the John Peel lecture gone?
It might have done.
I think it probably has.
I feel heartbroken talking about John
It's
Peel.
ridiculous.
I know.
But that's a classic case of
They renamed...
not an appropriate person to put alongside these kind of things.
I know.
But if I think, they used to have the Peel wing.
There was
didn't they?
Peel. I don't know if the Peel wing. I really don't know. Well, there's certainly there was a Peel stage, wasn't there? At
Glastonbury.
Glastonbury's been renamed Woodsies. Peel. I find that heartbreaking, really. The whole thing, because I was very, very fond of John Peel. But and also John Peel, let's not forget, was the person who told everybody in enormous detail of the things that he did that were so appalling. He made a point of saying, "This is what I've done." He didn't try to hide from it at all.
No, sure. So anyway, well, that's the BBC dealt with. I tell you what, I watched this last week. I rewatched this last week while trying to steel myself for the advent of the Bob Dylan film biopic featuring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan, which is, I'm sorry, I can't take seriously at all. I went back and watched the Coen brothers film Inside Llewyn Davis,
which is really good.
It's
a really good film.
It's a really good film made about how long ago? Probably 10 years ago now. And if you haven't seen it, do go and watch it. I think it's on Netflix or Amazon Prime or one of those things. And it's the story. It's set in the kind of the milieu of Greenwich Village in 1961-62, out of which Bob Dylan emerged and all those people, Peter, Paul and Mary. But it tells the story of Llewyn Davis, who is a kind of up-and-coming folkie. And the interesting twist in Inside Llewyn Davis is he's a shit, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's an absolute shit.
Utterly self-interested. It's got none of that, sharing, caring kind of.
But here's the point. He's he's taking advantage of girlfriends.
Oh yeah, everybody
steal stuff from people.
Yeah.
He's dossing on everybody's floor. He's pinching material. He's doing this, that, and the other. And because this is framed like all Coen brothers films, like a kind of Greek myth, it comes to no good. It comes to a bad end, And the film has a terrific ending, which is he's being duffed up in the alley while you're hearing the sound of the real Bob Dylan.
Which is an actual outtake, isn't it, of Bob Dylan, I think, playing...
whatever the song is, I can't remember.
Yeah,
Restless Farewell or one of those, right, one of those kind of things.
You see a sort of shadowy silhouette of someone with a harmonica holder.
And suddenly you hear... you've watched the film and you've heard all these actors and musicians do kind of quite tolerable versions of folk staples, and suddenly hear the real Bob Dylan, and you think, my God, that's
good.
Different.
That's different.
That lives.
That has a real individuality,
really does.
Real personality,
and so that's kind of the end of the film. Bob Dylan makes it, and Llewyn Davis presumably doesn't. He goes back to doing what he did before. But here's the thing that the film makes you think, which is an interesting contrast with the Timothée Chalamet film, which is, how do we know that Bob Dylan wasn't just as much of a shit as Llewyn Davis? And all right, he was fabulously talented, but how do you know he didn't do all those things? Just the same things. Because once you make a conventional rock biopic, the subject is a kind of saint.
A complete saint.
And everything they do
well,
is
actually, we do
fine.
know that Bob Dylan tended to ride roughshod over all sorts of people.
And stole people's records.
Certainly stole people's records, and certainly stole people's girlfriends, and used people. And I mean, I don't think we should get on our high horse about that kind of thing, because in order to be successful, you have to do all sorts of things that will that may not be particularly pleasant. But I think he probably was. But I think one of the successes about that film is that at no point are you being required to believe that a particular actor is a particular person that you're familiar with in real life. There's nobody playing the part of a member of the band or Grossman or somebody managed.
Well, there is somebody playing Grossman.
Oh, is somebody playing
Murray Abraham plays Grossman. He goes to see Grossman, although he doesn't try to look like him at all.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if he even does he call him Grossman?
Maybe
he goes to see him at the Gate of Horn Club in Chicago.
Oh, right.
And he plays a song for Murray Abraham playing Albert Grossman. And it's a brilliant scene. He just plays a song, and Grossman just looks at him. And when he's finished, he goes, "I don't see any money here."
That's right.
That's his one response. I don't see any money
Which is
here.
a very fair response.
Very fair
Don't you see? Because this guy's thinking of it as a piece of fabulous artistic expression.
No.
But is he ever going to earn any cash? No, the thing about the biopic is that biopics are, I mean, obviously aimed at the under 25s, and most of them trying to kind of reimagine your pop culture stars as kind of style icons, don't they? And I was trying to think, I mean, we're too old because we've grown up with the actual stars we're very familiar with, and it's very hard to be convinced that actor is playing us. But there have been a few exceptions. I thought the Baz Luhrmann Elvis was very good. The Ray Charles thing I haven't seen.
That's
meant to be very, very good.
It is.
The Control, Anton Corbijn's Control, brilliant. That's just a really good, really funny, really characterful film. Coal Miner's Daughter I thought was great. Rocket Man, pretty good. But ultimately, the biggest problem I think those things have got when you're trying to tell a story is trying to do it without being cliched. You know, if you look at those films, that someone is bound to say, "As I live and breathe, David Bowie," or whatever, in case you didn't recognise who it is. You know,
what's your name, son? David Jones. But I think I'm changing it to David Bowie.
Exactly. Yeah,
there will be that, won't there? Yeah.
I say, is that David Gilmour of the Pink Floyd over there having a pint? I think it is. You know. It's terrible. There's one, Billy Idol arrives in, I think it was the Sex Pistols film, and somebody says something like, "Oh, the Bromley contingent are here.
Yes.
Hello, William," or something like that, and you think it's so clunky. But what can you do? You know?
No, they've got to do it.
Walk the Line was full of that, and I can't remember what they were now. Walk the Line seemed to be full of such obvious things.
Yeah.
You know?
But anyway, Inside Llewyn Davis, if you've never seen it, I still highly recommend it. A very sour look at the kind of folk scene in the early 60s. It is Let's get this right. 49 years
since Born to
this
Run.
month.
Yeah.
Since the release of Born to Run. And I was just, once again, looking at the cover and thinking about how it's one of my favourite stories about Bruce Springsteen. That it was a long struggle making this album. And but during it, he just decided he was going to go and have his picture taken by a very good photographer. And he wasn't going to go on his own. Eric Miola.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to go on his own. And he wasn't going to go with the rest of the band. He was going to take Clarence Clemons along.
It's fantastic.
And just have these pictures of the two of them, you know, with him leaning on Clarence's shoulder. And so he's playing the guitar and Clarence is playing the saxophone. And I just think it's such a kind of eloquent cover, apart from the fact it's a great cover, you know, because I just think it proves how somebody like Bruce Springsteen has probably forgotten more about what you might call branding than most of us will ever know.
Isn't he wearing an Elvis lapel badge in there? I think it is.
Oh God, he might
if
well
I'm trying
be.
to remember the cover now, have a look
He
at
might
it.
well be. But anyway, he's wearing a leather jacket and a kind of slashed vest. He's carrying his guitar, electric guitar.
Really scuffed old.
So it's very clear this is not... If anybody thought I was kind of like John Prine, I'm not. You know what I mean? If anybody thought I was like Billy Joel, I'm not. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Electric guitar.
And there he is with Clarence and the saxophone. And I think that very clearly says, you know, the range of what we do is kind of white rock and roll, and it's also black rhythm and blues.
Yeah.
You know, the saxophone is just a hugely important part of the messaging. But also, probably more important than all those things, is that clearly says, this is my band, I'm in charge, this is my act. And the act will henceforth, and has been for 49 years since, about me. You know what I mean? I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but just, it's my legend. You know what I mean? It's my myth. I'm starting off making it here. You know what I mean? And I will carry on doing it.
I don't think he consulted them, did he? Because what kind of a meeting would he have had if he
There
called
was
the
no
band
meeting.
together and say, by the way, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take Clarence.
Yeah.
None of you guys are invited.
Absolutely.
It would have been impossible to resolve. The only way you can resolve it is by doing
Just
it,
doing
printing it up, and then saying, it's the way it is.
If you don't like it, matey.
Sling your hook.
And I think that's been his watchword ever since.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable that he's held so many of those musicians with him. People have gone and come back and whatever, you know. Because you would have thought a certain number would have gone off in a huff and think, I can make it on my own, I'll go and play with Billy Joel or whatever, you know. But, you know, this is my story. I'm the lead. I'm the author. I'm the director. You guys are supporting characters. Very important supporting characters.
But
I'm going to make a fuss about all of you on stage. I'm going to give everybody a diminutive.
Yep.
You know, Professor Roy Benton,
Yep.
Phantom Dan Federici, Mighty Max Weinberg, Clarence Big Man Clemens, you know, Miami Steve Van Zandt. I will build up all these characters, but they will be clearly my crew. You know, you're slightly behind me because I'm the star. And as I say, I don't say that to indicate it was all ego. It's not. It's just... It's somebody owning their own story.
But in their heart of hearts, they couldn't really have objected because this is the guy who wrote all the songs anyway. Also, it was an interesting thing. It was such a bold statement at the time because, unless I'm completely mistaken, that was a double album sleeve at a time when only double album sleeves, gatefold albums, had two albums in them.
Yeah.
And that's a single album.
Yeah, that's
so I'm
probably
pretty
true.
sure that Columbia actually put up a huge fight saying, we're not going to spend all this ridiculous amount of money to have a double album sleeve when we don't need to. Because there's only one album, and he just said, that is the point I'm trying to make. And I want this picture to be huge, and it wouldn't have worked nearly as well on a single sleeve. It just wouldn't.
No,
It's
absolutely.
about the size of it.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
phone's ringing in the background. At that point, we ought to just sign off, really.
We should do.
Because
I'm going on to the phone.
I don't know who that is on the phone. This has been The Word Podcast. Bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.